So drowning in Pshat is a phrase coined years ago to describe a frustrating Jewish intellectual phenomenon. The lack of willingness of those who learn Torah to dig deeper and develop a more profound understanding of history and current events. They are so preoccupied with mastering Pshat that they literally drown in it. Someone, a gadol recently said that, it's got to the point that most bochim, basically, they learn Pshat, they learn Chumash only through the Gemara. And the way people are emphasizing learning the Meforshim, that it'll get to a point where basically people start learning the Gemara through the Brisker Rav. Because it's just more emphasis on these things. What does this mean? First, there's the word Pshat. Pshat from the Hebrew word Pashut, which means simple, in Torah learning refers to the simplest and most basic explanation of an idea. It is the version of a concept that emerges when first exposed to it, before asking the question, what does this really mean? For as the Midrash points out, even the simplest of Torah ideas can be understood on many levels. As it says, the Midrash says, there are 70 facets of Torah, turn it around, and around for everything's inside of it. And so to access those 70 facets, explains the result, one must enter something called Pardes. So he says in Shar HaGilgulim, the following thing, there are 4 levels of Torah understanding, and the Roshei Tevos is Pardes, right? Roshei Tevos being the first letter of each of the 4 Hebrew words, right? They are Pshat, Remez, Drush, and Sod. This is a side point. The word Pardes, the Hebrew word Pardes, is the basis of the English word paradise, because the first paradise, in fact, was a Pardes, and not just a Pardes in a physical sense, but a Pardes in this sense, that Adam Rishon, where he was living before the Chet on the level of Atzilus, very high up, that it was much more of an intellectual reality. One of the questions they ask, or one of the discussions amongst the Mekubalim, is whether it's even permissible to actually teach Kabbalah, to verbalize, not just even to somebody else, but even to yourself. Because the moment you verbalize something, you draw it down, you bring it down to a lower level, because to express it in words means to express it on a lower level. That's why Moshe Rabbeinu says to Kosh Baruch Hu that I'm also a sign of uncircumcised lips, and Aaron HaKohen is the one who's chosen to act as intermediary between him and Paro. So the Meforshim explained that meant because Moshe Rabbeinu saw things on such a high abstract level, he didn't want to profane it by bringing it down to the level of Paro. He could bring it to the level of Aaron HaKohen, who then he himself could take it to a lower level and translate it for Paro. But he was talking on a much higher level. That's already a physical being. Adam Rishon was in the level of Kesonos Or with an Aleph, right? He was made from light. His whole reality was so incredibly high up that we can't even really conceive of it at this point in time. But once again see that Techis Amesim, which the Gemara says that at that point in time, anybody who's gone through the process of resurrection will actually look like a Malach. So, we're talking about a heavenly reality. Even though it was, so to speak, earth, it was a physical world that it was a part of, let's say, compared to other high realities, but everything in Ma'aseh Bereshis was on a much higher level. So the actual Pardes that he lived in was not a Pardes we'd have today, where you have apples growing in the fields and oranges and things like that. His Pardes literally would have been intellectual reality. So that's why, as the lesson explains, when Hashem said to Adam Rishon, Shomer Avda, go and guard the garden and work the garden, he wasn't saying go to Home Depot and go pick yourself a hoe and start digging away and plant things already, make it look like a nice little garden over here. He was talking on the level of what is Hashem in terms of intellectually, connecting to Kosh Baruch on a much higher level. So it really was a Pardes. The actual Pardes in the beginning was the ultimate Pardes. Today a Pardes is different, but that's what it refers to. So Pardes refers to Pshat, Remez, Drush, and Sod. That would have been the Pardes of Adam Rishon.
Why when Adam when Harum spoke it out, why wasn't that reducing it?
Because just the same way the spheres filter the light, right? Chachma, if the light of Chachma, or let's just start even higher up, Keser went from Keser to Chachma and didn't change, the next level would not be called Chachma, it would still be called Keser. It's the same light. Wherever that light would go. Why is it called Chachma? Because Chachma means the light on the way down somehow was reduced in its intensity, right? So the same way that the spheres act as intermediaries, and therefore they receive the light on one level, right? Chachma has to receive the light on the level of Keser, so to speak, but filter it down for Bina to a lower level. That's the level of Chachma. So Aaron HaKohen acted in the exact same way. He was a filter. He was able to receive the light. Moshe himself had to step it down somewhat for Aaron HaKohen, But when Aaron received it, so he was able to understand it on a level and then filter it down. The same way, for example, what we're doing right now is the exact same idea. Someone learns the Zohar. If he gave the Zohar over exactly the way it's written, and doesn't bother to explain it, the audience would go, what? What is that supposed to mean? What are those ideas all about? So what does a person do? He learns the Zohar on the level that it's being written. He understands it, and then he finds a way to describe it in terms of the audience can relate to. He's just filtered it. That's what Aaron did. Aaron received it and he filtered it, and that's what education is all about. So he goes on and says, a person needs to work hard in all of them to the best of his ability and find a teacher who can teach them to him. If he lacks one of these four levels relative to what he could have learned, then he will have to reincarnate to compensate for what he is missing. So contrary to popular belief, for many people, for example, who look at Kabbalah as being out in left field, we'll see, at some point in time, I don't know exactly where it shows up, but basically these correspond to the four levels of learning. Obviously, Pshat corresponds to Mikra. Mikra is, you learn the Chumash. You learn a pasuk from Chumash, a simple pasuk, basically, you're chazing the Parsha. That's the level of Pshat. That's the level of, obviously Pshat applies to anything, also the Gemara. But the simplest Pshat, the system of learning, is a simple pasuk from the Chumash. It's not complicated. Then comes the level of Remez. That's the level of Mishnah, right? Mishnah works by Ramazim. It works by hints. It doesn't speak the whole thing out. It doesn't elaborate on ideas. Even the language itself is very terse because it's been meant, for memories. It's the oral law. So that's already on a deeper level. Then you have the level of Drush, which of course is the Gemara. The Gemara is constantly, it's constantly the process of Drush, by being dorish and investigating and going deeper and deeper to try to come to the conclusion as to what this idea actually means, because we need to do that for the sake of deciding halacha, because it's when you understand the actual kind. That's why the Gemara spends so much time, splitting hairs and even creating scenarios that seem to be way beyond what might happen in everyday life. But it does that specifically because only by pushing the envelope with an idea can you get to the essence of the concept. And once you have the essence, then you can apply it to everyday life, wherever it has to be applied. All the applications we have today of halacha that are modern day scenarios based upon ancient halacha, meaning that it goes back to Torah, back to Sinai 3,000 years ago, has been made possible because of the fact that the Gemara took the time to explain the essence of the concept, so that we can say, well, therefore, turning a light bulb is a function of Eish, it's a function of fire. Turning a switch is a function of building. Now we can draw those conclusions. So most people think that's where it stops. Sod, Kabbalah. Who's it for, right? From a Kubbali, what do? Who knows, right? Somehow they're very spiritual, esoteric people. But the rest of us learning, if I go my entire life only learning Gemara, or I go my entire life only learning Mishnah, right? And never make an effort to try to get to the level where I'm zoichet to see things like Sod, then so what? What's the big deal? So the Arizal is saying, don't even think like that. We'll see why later on, why even more. It's so important how it creates the shleimus of a person, how that you cannot become an Adam Shalin without this level. But more importantly, it's the reason why we're drowning in history for the most part, and we don't understand what's going on, and we misperceive events and misperceive realities, and as a result of that, we misperceive the Gula. And that's really the bottom line, right? The bottom line is the Gula is probably here, it's been here, there's been a potential for Gula every single generation. Opportunities come and go, some are more opportune than others. And very often, there's also the Siddhas Chinam. The lack of coherency in the Jewish world today is based upon a lack of going to these deeper levels. But the Rizal is telling you that if you can fool yourself all you want, but the bottom line is, if you don't want to come back another time unnecessarily, make a point of learning all these levels as much as possible, because if you don't, you'll have to reincarnate, because it's considered to be a pagam. It's considered to be a chesaron, a lacking in a person not to have any of these levels if they are capable of getting to them. And you can't simply assume it's not important. He's saying, now this is the way it is, because where is this paragraph found? In Shar HaGilgulim. How many people learn Shar HaGilgulim? How many people make the point of going into it? So most people aren't even aware of it. So it becomes the obligation of the people that do to share that information. Because there are people that do, you can't keep it to yourself. You have to people to be exposed to it. But again, you're also fighting against stereotypes and stigmas and things like that. But he's putting it on the table, the idea itself.
That makes a lot of sense too on a national level, because if you're saying that if you don't learn these concepts, then you have to be reincarnated. And you're talking about, you would think when you talk about that, you're talking about on an individual level. But it's really also on a national level, because every generation, it doesn't makabel Mashiach, another generation has to occur. Has to occur, right? So it becomes, it just keeps perpetuating itself. So where does the Shlos Esrei Midot fit into this whole concept?
Well, what do you mean? Where's it fit into?
Well, we're talking about Drush, for instance, more, and these are tools. I mean, where does this fit into the realm of Pshat, Remez, Drush, and Sod?
It's purely from Sod. The Yud Gimel Midas Rachamim, right? As Rashi points out, it's the same thing.
No, I'm talking.
Oh, you mean the 13 midas of Rabbi Yishmael?
Exactly.
Those midas. Yeah. No, so that's Drush. He's in the Drush Behem, but they can put out all different levels. And actually, there's actually more than that. There's more than 13. There's other who actually quote quite a few.
32 more in. I think the back of one of the. I think it's back of.
So that basically is just a function of Drush. That's for the sake of, those are the rules that we apply to Torah. You look at it. In fact, the Art Scroll has a very good explanation, an example of each one. Right. And they go through each one by one, explain it. But basically, you see that the Gemara, in a prat, right? Zer Shava, Kol V'chomer. These are all tools that the Gemara uses for darshing of psukim, based of halach and Torah. It's a Masorah, it's a tradition. Moshe Rabbeinu had to receive those rules, right? For example, Gezer Shava, right, where you the same word appears in two different places, two different contexts, but you can learn halacha one from the other, right? So most Gezer Shavas basically are they're non-halachas, they're a tradition. And it's like we know there's a connection there. And Rabbi Kiva or someone came along later on and just used that instrument. You cannot, as far as I know, you cannot be mechadish Gezer Shava. You can go ahead and say, I wonder if they're connected. Certainly the ideas seem to be connected, but to say as law, as Torah Shebal Peh, for the most part, that had to be Masorah. That had to be tradition.
So Moshe got these on her.
Moshe got these.
So wouldn't that be in the realm of Sod?
The whole Har Sinai experience is pure Sod. That's what people don't realize. What is the point of Sod? What does it do ultimately, right? I mean, the Nefesh Chaim brings down that anybody who does not know the Sod of a mitzvah has no idea what the mitzvah is about. They're not really doing the mitzvah properly. You can't, it's like shooting at a target with your eyes blindfolded. How accurately can you hit the target in the end? And tefillah is called sloso, it's called an arrow. You're aiming. You're supposed to. It's like you're trying to hit something with the tefillah or with your mitzvahs that you're supposed to be doing. You can't just blindly do it. But the whole point of Sod basically is that life, and this is very important, life is a game of hide and go seek. That's what it is. In the beginning, in Gan Eden, HaKadosh Baruch Hu was so close, he could talk to Adam face to face, he could find him in the God. That's how close the relationship was. When Adam did the chet, he hid. What is a hiding? I mean, did he think for 1 second he could hide from HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Did he drop in levels so much that his understanding of how Hashem works is even lower than ours today? Of course not. The hiding itself means he created barriers. The actual hiding means that he created mesachim, veils, barriers, right? So when you learn Pshat, you take away one barrier, one veil, right? Or maybe two, who knows, right? You learn Mishnah, you go a little bit deeper, right? You're learning Drush, you're taking away more veils. Each one is Megala Kodesh Baruch Hu more and more and more. So Sod goes one step further, and not just, it doesn't even go one step further. The leap from Pshat to Remez is the smallest of all. From Remez to Drush, it's a little bit bigger. From Drush to Sod is miles. It's huge. The Gilui Hashchina, the Gilui of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Ma'aseh Bereshis, that comes through Sod is overdoes everything else that came before it. The whole point of learning Torah is the sake of penetrating and pulling back the veils of creation to find Hashem, who said, now that you have hidden, right, the rest of history is for finding me. These are very important, Kabbalistic ideas that I brought down. That's what it says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu made Ma'aseh Bereshis for his glory, right? Like Mekubim explained, not that he's going to benefit, meaning that the whole point of Ma'aseh Bereshis exists for the sake of revealing him. His name's revealed to him, the light that we draw down reveals him. That's the whole point of creation. You could spend a whole couple of hours explaining what this point actually means and how that becomes a schar l'mabah for how much you do that. Not only that, it's more than that. As it's known, right, that these 4 levels of Pshat, Remez, Drush, and Sod also correspond to the 4 levels of Neshama, Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, and Chaya. Yechida corresponds to Adam Kadmon, but we have no level of Torah learning for that because that's already a level way beyond anything we can, at that level you're one with knowledge. Actually, before that, but even more so than you can possibly comprehend. But the basic idea is that the deeper you go into Torah, the deeper you go to your neshama. Right? If you're only learning Chumash, you'll only penetrate the aspect of yourself called nefesh, which means you barely know yourself at all. You want to know yourself more deeply, you start learning Mishnah. By going deeper into Torah, you're also going deeper into your own neshama and therefore becoming more connected to it, and therefore becoming more one with yourself.
Yeah.
That's the ultimate, because at the end of it is a Kosh Baruch Hu, right? The whole point of becoming more connected to your neshama is to become a better partner for Hashem, so to speak. Because it's the same way, like imagine, two people meeting, someone decides that one day he wants to marry the princess, and he's only a commoner right now, right? And she's young, and he's the same age, basically, right? He can't do it right now because on the level as a commoner, she's the princess, it's not going to work. So what does he do? He goes to school, he learns, right? Literally becomes as much of a prince as he possibly can become, based upon what's available to him. So likewise, the same thing is true of us, that, as on the level of nefesh, it's very hard to connect to God, very hard. To feel Him, to feel His reality, to see it, to relate to it, to even to have any kind of like supernatural connection to Him. But as you go deeper into Torah, more and more and more, your ability to perceive Hashem in creation increases, and because that increases, He can reveal Himself more and more to you as well, because you become a stronger kli to receive His light.
Okay, but
it's all about relationship.
But most, maybe all of us, we've been here before, and in order to get to that level of sod, you've had to have done the other levels. And if you didn't do them in your previous lifetimes, and now you're here, and if this is the last generation of Gullus, first generation of Geula, it's going to get cut off. You'll never reach that level.
Yeah.
So how does that fit in?
So first of all, as he says, based upon the person's ability and their situation.
But
okay?
most of us will never get to that level that the Arizal's talking about.
Not necessarily. First of all, you're still young. You know what's coming up. Is what Hashem is. But also it says that before Mashiach comes, also Kosh Baruch Hu is going to just increase the amount of light flowing to Ma'aseh Bereshis, and also we'll be able to perceive things that previous generations would have had to have worked a lot harder to receive those things. But this concept of Pshat and Jerusalem Sod is not only that you go from the Chumash to the Mishnah to the Gemara to the Zohar, right? It's also a process that you apply to everything. For example, if you're going to learn a pasuk, you're going to learn the Chumash. You have to run through Pshat and Jerusalem Sod, right? Which means, for example, as we'll see, there's an example coming up shortly, but let's wait till we get there. But everybody in their own level, and for example, you pick up a sefer, but the main thing is, here's the main thing, and that is you have to be driven to have as deep an understanding of life and Torah and mitzvahs as you possibly can. You cannot be lazy, but you cannot simply rest on your present existing state of learning. You have to know there's more, and you have to pursue them more as much as possible. And that's a very important part of Hashgacha Pratis, because someone who does, Hashem opens doors, opens windows, opens opportunity. I once, I can speak personally as a personal example of this idea, because for many years I didn't even consider learning Zohar. I mean, once everyone opens a Zohar once in a while, looks up a Pshat or something to understand some kind of reference, but it wasn't on my radar for the longest time. And then one day, I was learning Midrashim, and I did a deeper and deeper understanding. I felt I got to a point where obviously there was a lot more to learn, but I felt that there must be more, and I wanted to know that more. And I just got this feeling intensified over time. And just at the point, and I hadn't spoken it out with anybody at this point, but just at the point in my mind where I felt, I got to somehow make an entry into that world, a neighbor of mine shows up with a sefer, the Shari Leshem, and says, we need to learn this together. He literally a day later, walks into my front door, and that was my first exposure. My first real exposure, my first real entry, and you see, Kosh Baruch Hu, he works it out. Somehow, if the person understands this is what has to happen, is making the effort to make it happen, Kosh Baruch Hu will find ways to feed it to you somehow. Okay, does it mean a person is a Seder in Zohar? Not necessarily, right? And more than likely not. But it means that the person will get the exposure to deeper ideas and see the sod behind the concept. He'll go to a shir He'll sit in the shir where somebody will give over information that will reveal the sod of a concept, of a mitzvah, of marriage, whatever the case may be. It's all part of the picture. Who knows how much you can accumulate in one lifetime? But the main thing is to get on the, in this process and not simply accept lower levels of understanding.
Yeah, I think what you're saying, Rob, is that by exposing yourself to it, you become receptive to greater possibilities.
Exactly.
And by doing that, when when people begin to talk, you no longer close down and be prejudiced toward the words because you don't understand them. Because had you not ever heard that this concept exists, that's the reaction you would have, typically, right? But when you've been exposed to it now, you open up to it.
Not only that, but as you listen to them, you will get new insights from what they're saying that you previously would never even thought of, because that's the direction you're moving.
That's the next step.
The ultimate chavrusa is a Kodesh Baruch Hu. He's the ultimate chavrusa. If you're willing to go with him, he will show you and expose you to things and give you hatzlacha that is not commensurate to what you're doing. You'll find that people who they're knowledge, and not only that, by the way, I even found a source that what does the Gemara mean? It says that even the air is machkim a person in Eretz Yisrael, right? Just the air itself is machkim a person, right? So just got wiser. Breathing, just got wiser all of a sudden. What does it mean? It means basically that it's a long story, but the basic idea is we know that the Or Ganuz is what this is all about. The hidden light of creation, with which what a Kodesh Baruch Hu made my separations. He hid it. The rest of life is about finding it. This is the process. How do you reveal the light? This is the process, right? So as Rashi points out, because the Gemara says it, that on the first day of creation, Kodesh Baruch Hu saw that Rishayim would abuse this light, so therefore he hid the light, and therefore it's rightly called Or Ganuz, the hidden light of creation. It's obviously not the light of the sun, the moon, the stars, because they don't come out till day 4, and incandescent lighting didn't come out till 3, 4, 5,000 years later, right? So and Rishayim use this light equally as we do, right? And the sun, the moon, the stars. So it's obviously a much more spiritual light. From Rashi, it sounds like it's a light that's reserved for tzaddikim, lasid lavo, mini Yamasa Mashiach onward. But the Leshem explains, no, the hiding was not that. The hiding was not from everybody. The hiding was that Kodesh Baruch Hu built into this light a condition that your midus will determine whether you can have access to this light or not. If you're a tzaddik, the light will flow towards you. If a person's a rasha, God forbid, the light will repel them. They'll repel the light they had. So as a result of that, two people can look at the exact same thing. One person who's a tzaddik will see it, and one person who's a rasha won't be able to see it. Right? So it's interesting. The Gemara calls people who live in Chutz La'aretz of the Avodah Zarah b'tahara. A tzaddik. A tzaddik who's living in Chutz La'aretz is an Ovid of Avodah Zarah b'tahara. What does it mean? It means that b'tahara, he's a tzaddik. He's living by all the Torah mitzvahs. He's not doing any affairs per se. So why is it called Avodah Zarah? Because since he's forcing Kodesh Baruch Hu to give him shefa for his mitzvahs and his Torah, in Chutz La'aretz, the shefa has to, by definition, flow through the angel of that place. That angel is on the side of Tumah automatically, spiritual impurity, because it's in Chutz La'aretz. So therefore, it's like you're feeding the Avodah Zarah at the same time. So it's called Avodah Zarah b'Torah, right? So and he pays for that. There's an onus for that. There's a suri for that, because you're forcing a Kodesh Baruch Hu's hand to have this shefa flow through this impure angel. However, in Israel, of course, it doesn't happen because of the fact that Michael is the Sarshel of Eretz Yisrael. He's totally kadosh, and therefore all the shefa that flows back and forth in Eretz Yisrael is always through the hands of kedusha. There's no such thing as you have in Chutz La'aretz. What about the fact that a person only accesses the light if he's a tzaddik? Comes along the Ramak and says that anybody who lives in Eretz Yisrael, by definition, has a shem tzaddik to him. If they didn't, they'd be kicked out. Last week's parsha, both parshas, Achrei Mos and Kedoshim, end by talking about don't do this, right? That the people you came from, Mitzrayim, and the people you're going to, because the land spit them out, and you will be spit out as well. So therefore, the Ramak learns from this that and brings down Rayas. That's what Moshe Cordovero, right? That anybody who's living in Israel who's not been kicked out of the land by definition as a Shem Tzaddik, how's that possible? Even afil becheses Rasha, he says, even if the person has a chazaka, people view this person as being a Rasha. He's still living here. He hasn't been kicked out yet. He has a status of being a tzaddik. So how's it possible? So he explains how the land is
I
mechaper.
think you said last week. Remember last week you were saying that.
Yeah, you read it inside. You read it inside, right?
It's inside.
That's it. And even this week, though, it's still a tough concept to swallow.
It's a very hard concept to swallow, but that's the Messiah.
So
now, but
he was quoting
exactly.
He was quoting the Arizal.
Yeah, 100%. So now you understand what the Gemara means by saying, because this is a very, very fascinating Gemara. I mean, very fascinating Gemara. Right? Even the air is machkim a person. Even the air makes a person wise. If I always fall back on this example, but money talks, right? If someone's in the business of making money and someone says you can make a lot of money over there, he doesn't say, that's all he says, right? What's the guy going to do? Where? A lot of money over where, right? If you're in the business of making money, that's what you're going to think. You hear that's the way you do it. The Jewish people are in the business of wisdom. We're in the business of chachma. We're in the business of being bein olam haba. Someone says, and it's an authority, because it's the Gemara in Baba Basra. This is Tanoim saying this, among Moraim, and no one argues the point, and says you can get wisdom by breathing the air of Eretz Yisrael. What is that supposed to mean? What does that mean? Literally?
Rush there.
Yeah. No, but I get off the airplane, I just stand there. What if I go for 1 week and do nothing but hyperventilate? Does that make me a Tamil Chachma? What does that mean? So you have to go to the sod of the whole thing. That's the bottom line. It all comes into sod because there's so many important ideas.
Now you gave me an idea because.
See, I told you.
Today I was learning Rabbi Wine. I was looking at shir of his, and he was talking about the period of time in the Middle Ages, the church march, and they were very strong, and we were kicked out of England. First time we kicked out of England was around the beginning of the 12th century,
right.
The end of the 12th century. And we went there because business was supposed to be better than where we were because we were kicked out of France and other places. Okay, so when we went to England, it was supposed to be like the next stop. So when we got there, things turned around and they got bad. And ultimately, we left. We had to leave. They kicked us out. They threw us out. And not only did they throw us out, we left with nothing. They wouldn't even let us take our books. That's why Oxford has all of the manuscripts. They confiscated the manuscripts. They wouldn't even let us leave with our books. So what's Hashem saying? Listen, go to the air where you can become a doctor.
Yeah, right. Who needs books? Right. But so what does the Gemara mean? The Gemara is telling you that basically that because of the fact that Eretz Yisrael, by definition, is mechaper for you on an ongoing basis, and therefore leash in the status of a tzaddik, it means you have ongoing access to the Or Ganuz by virtue of the fact you live in Eretz Yisrael. And that's what the Gemara says: Ein Torah, Ketorah is Eretz Yisrael, right? Because Eretz Yisrael is a special koyach that draws down. That's why we mentioned before the Yarden is Yerad Nun, right? The Nun Shari Bina. The whole border is the Sulam. It's like one of. But again, it's all a function of sod. Anyway, let's go a little wider. He says.
Well, what are those nefesh ruach neshama? Is that what
nefesh ruach neshama and chaya.
And this corresponds to the various levels, right? Pshat,
for the four levels,
Rosh,
exactly.
And what do you
yeah,
right?
Also the four worlds: Asiya, Yitzira, Bria. They all correspond across the border, right? Okay, so he said that's what he says. The following is an example of a Torah-based Torah idea learned on all four levels of Pardes. The first verse of the Torah on a Pshat level, traditionally understood to simply mean Bereshis B'Elokim as Hashemayim as Haaretz, which means in the beginning God made the heaven and the earth. Classic, simple explanation. Nobody argues with that. You can change the wording, the pronunciation, but that's basically the way the pasuk reads. However, as Rashi points out, the first word of the Torah in Hebrew, Bereshis, does not translate this way, alluding to a different level of meaning. That's remes. Right? Pshat is what you see. It's out there in the open. It's like it's available to everybody. It's what your first perception. Remez is like winking, right? Winking is a physical thing. You can also see it, but the wink itself doesn't tell you anything. It just tells you that something is going on. You're talking amongst 4 or 5 people. One guy winks at another person. You have no idea what he means, but you know there's something going on because you can see it, but you can't unless you investigate. You're not going to know what it means. So the Torah is winking at us over here by using the word Bereshis as opposed to the word Birishon. That's what Rashi says. This verse is only meant for elucidation, as the rabbis teach, For the sake of Torah, which is called the beginning, Reshis, of his way, passage from Mishlei, and for the sake of the Jewish people, who are called the beginning, Reshis, of his increase, in Yirmiyahu. God made the heaven and the earth. In other words, for the sake of Bereshis. We understood Bereshis as being one word. It turns out that Bereshis can't be the word here, because if you want to say the beginning of something, using the proper language, you would say Berishona. Berishona bara Elokim es hashamayim v'es haaretz. But to say Bereshis means it doesn't fit. It's not the construct. So therefore, what the Torah can't be wrong. I know what it means to have editors and still make mistakes in your books. But God had no editors because God's perfect, and He writes the Sefer Torah. It's perfect. Moshe did it letter by letter, word by word. It's perfect. They didn't, and certainly the first word. No author makes a mistake in the first word of his book. That's more than So what's Bereshis? So Rashi says Bereshis is two words. Bereshis. That works. For the sake of Reshis. What's Reshis? We bring them psukim. One Reshis refers to Torah itself. One Reshis refers to the Jewish people. And the verse pasuk is telling you that for the sake of Torah and for the sake of the Jewish people, God made heaven and the earth.
What's the word Reshis mean? First?
It means first.
First.
Yeah. Reshis goyim. Amalek is Reshis goyim, right?
First.
Reshis means first. So Reshis is the proper pronunciation. That's the proper word for the pshat over here. This concept is true.
For the sake of the first.
Yeah, for the sake of the first, and we explain what the first is based on the psukim. So that's just that the text is not intended to point out the order of creation as most people think. For if it intended to teach this, it would have written the word Berishona. That means the beginning of something. Since the word Reshis in the Torah is in the construct state, it should be followed by another word to explain what it's talking about normally. So therefore, we know this concept is true because we see in the Gemara in Shabbos on Pei Ches Amud Aleph, in the famous Gemara over there, where the Gemara asks a question. Every day of Maaseh Bereshis, it says, V'hi Voker Yom Echad, V'hi Voker Yom Sheni. All of a sudden, by day 6, it adds a hey, right? V'hi Voker Yom Hashishi. So the Gemara says, what's the hey? The Gemara says the hey refers to Chamishi Chum Sheitara, and the Shishi is referring to the 6th of Sivan. So why is it over here? What's the remez? Why is this alluded to over here and that pasuk? Because the Kodesh Baruch Hu made it tonight with Maaseh Bereshis. If the Jewish people will accept the Torah on the 6th of Sivan, 2,448 years from now, right? Then the world has permission to go weiter, to go on. But if not, I hereby command the world to go back to Tova Vohu. So we see from that Gemara and from that pasuk that the world stands on the Torah and the Jewish people accepting Torah. So therefore, Bereshis, in a sense, is a warning. And it's also Pshat, telling us, for the sake of Torah and for the sake of the Jewish people, God made creation. If they don't exist, the whole world has no justification to exist. That's the remnants of that one word. Bereshis on a Pshat level means in the beginning God made the heaven and the earth. And Bereshis on a remnants level means for the sake of Reshis, God made the heaven and the earth.
So when you're saying for the sake of Reshis, all we're seeing is for the sake of for the sake of something, right?
Yeah, the bu means for the sake of.
For the sake of.
Yeah.
What is left out is what it is the sake for. So we're now filling in the blanks and saying it's for the sake of the Jewish people,
right?
And also for the sake of what?
Torah.
What's the proof of that?
How do you know that?
What's the proof that those words mean that?
No, what's the proof that Reshi means for the sake of the Jewish people and the sake of Torah?
Well, that's why he brings the psukim down. The one passage from Yirmiyahu. Well, the concept existed before. This is not a chiddush. We know this already. Just like about the Gemara down Shabbos. Like all of Torah Shabbat Peh, we know these concepts to be true. These are things that God taught to Moshe Rabbeinu conceptually. We know as a historical fact. That's the way it works, basically. So all we're doing basically is we're putting clothing on the idea. We're going back and we're finding source in the Torah for ideas that we know to be true. So and Rashi's backing himself up by bringing psukim to show that we in fact are called Reshis, and because Amalek's also called Reshis. Maybe he's also
So essentially, I see what you're saying. So that was answering Steve also. So Bill Remez, if you're saying now that the hay is for the indication of the Torah, right? And the hashishi is on the 6th day of Sivan, right? So there, how did only Hashem would know that in the future we would receive the Torah.
Right.
So otherwise, he would have destroyed the world right there and then.
Right. Okay.
Okay?
Fine.
Right? Okay.
Yeah.
So now, when we're using Yeshayahu to come back and explain Rashis, it makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Because he sees the process from his position going backward.
Right.
Hashem sees it.
Okay. Yeah.
You know what I'm trying to say, Steve? So we can use ordinarily. We wouldn't. How are we now? Because most people would object using Navi to explain a very important word in the Torah, especially the first word in the Torah, saying Rashis.
Right.
All right. It's like the Gemara. You're not going to use the Gemara. What are you know? And you can explain the Gemara concept. If you don't have a pasuk in the Torah, and now you have to go fishing into the Navi for it, you start to say, "Oh, wait a minute! What kind of a proof is this?" You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
But the fact that we know that God, is not telling us emphatically what He's talking about, but we do know that He would have destroyed the world, right? But it's still in existence. Must be that He's going to let us rely on the Navi to explain why He is that He didn't destroy it in the first place.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
You know?
So hence the usage of the Hebrew word Bereshis. Yeah. Hence the use of the Hebrew word Bereshis instead of Bereshone hints, remez, to a different layer of meaning for the first verse. Rather than translate Bereshis as in the beginning, as is traditionally done, it is understood to mean, for the sake of Reshis, God made the heaven and earth, Reshis referring to both the Torah and the Jewish people. That's those two levels so far.
Is that remez?
That's remez. It's all remez, yeah. Drush, from the word lidrosh, to investigate, is trickier because it is not usually as obvious as the level of remez and often requires a tradition. In this case, like with respect to remez, the focus is the first word of the Torah, Bereshis, except that it is understood differently.
So this is where the Shlosh Esrei Midrei would come in. That would have to be given by God. In other words,
but those are different tools for connecting different psukim. We're dealing right here with one word only. There's one word, and just understanding it on the four levels. We have midrashim to explain these things. We have sources for these ideas. So those midos are basically you could apply here also, but those midos for the most part, for the sake of using the verses to.
Well, I think the Meforshim go into it and they talk about it in Rashi brings down, they talk about where Rashis occurs everywhere in the Torah. Doesn't he talks about it like Purim and here and there.
100%, yeah.
So that must be like
yeah, but Rashi, see what's going on over here. This is a very important principle also to bring out that when you learn Gemara, the Gemara example asks the question that how do you know that a married woman has to cover her hair? So the Gemara brings up the whole in Sota. Right, the adulteress, who gets caught and she has to go to the Beis Hamikdash, and it says in the Torah that they uncover her hair, right? And from this we learn out that a married woman covers her hair. So anybody who's not yet well seasoned in Gemara and tradition would ask the question, how's that a proof? From that one little proof, you're going to make all married women through all history cover their hair? Maybe they put it on her head when she first walked in. Maybe she forgot to wash her hair. She wanted to cover her hair before she got there. Who knows? It could be a dozen reasons why her hair was covered and why this is part of the process to uncover her hair.
You also see that, why don't we use it by when, what's his name, the wife of, from the tribe of Shimon, sat in front of the door. Who was that?
On the pellet.
She was sitting in front of the door with her hair on.
Yeah, but that's a medrash. That's a medrash. That's not a pasuk. Not a pasuk. So the question is aren't you really reaching into? It doesn't say the Torah. It says she wore tefillin. She wore tefillin. It's black and white. And also tefillin are black and white. You got to put them on and wear them, right? But this is really stretching and reaching because this is if it just said and the married woman who was covered, who had her hair covered as a married woman, took off her hair covering. That's one thing. But here it says that she's a sota, unusual circumstance. The whole halakha is kind of cloudy. How can you make that the basis of such an important halakha that's going to affect women for who knows how many thousands of years? So the answer is because we're not asking what's the source of this halakha. If that was the case, that would be a good question. We know already married women cover their hair. How do we know that? Because it's a Masorah. From a part of the Torah Shabbat Peh that Moshe got from Har Sinai, that a married woman's hair is called an Erev, and therefore she has to cover her hair. There's like a kol is also called an erva. We know this from Torah Shebal Peh. The Gemara is asking the question, but I know all of Torah Shebal Peh is somewhere inside Torah Sheksav. Right? I know that. And the Gemara is concerned primarily with marrying the two together. We want to make them one. Right? How do you know that a woman can be acquired using Kesser Shtar Biyah from a field? That doesn't go over too well with a lot of women, basically. That's how you're going to learn the halacha about marriage over here? No, we know that money, Kesser Kedushin, is used, and these other devices are used to make marriage. We're now looking for a pasuk, something in the Torah that will tell us that. There's times it's obvious, the pasuk itself says exactly that thing, and there's times it can't be so obvious because the Torah, is mesuyam. It's a certain amount of letters, for the souls of Klal Yisrael. Which Baruch Hu wrote in such a way that it's not like this. If the Torah Shebal had all of Torah Shebal Peh in it, the entire Shulchan Aruch and the Gemara, basically, nobody could do Hagbah by themselves. Okay, it would basically be massive. That's not the reason why Kodesh Baruch Hu kept it separate. And not to make it practical. You always make it stronger people too. Hagbah could be 6 people at one time, as opposed to share the kibbudim much easier. But that's just a practical reality and representation. But we know that the halach is that she has to cover her hair. Now we're saying, where in the Torah could there be a source for that idea? So now the most obvious one is the Sota. See, if you're looking for the source, it's not so obvious from Sota. If you're looking just for a basis for this halacha, the most obvious one is the Sota all of a sudden. That's the difference. So everything we're stating, Medrash, everything basically is part of Torah Shebal Peh. It's an idea that was given to Moshe Ben Har Sinai that he passed down. If I'm going to be mechadish something, I cannot be megaleh panim b'Torah. I cannot make new ideas that Moshe did not get. What I can do is find new applications. I can find new expressions of it, and I can use old ideas to explain new realities. Right? That's all mutter. That's all part of my makkah b'Torah in the end. But the idea itself has to go back to Moshe Ben Har Sinai. This is the fundamental problem that people have, in the conservative and reform movement. They don't understand it's not what's going on. What they think is that the rabbis didn't make this up. This has to go back to Har Sinai. What the rabbis did was they said, okay, now knowing the halacha is part of our tradition, your law, where can we trace it back? So likewise, what Rashi is doing over here, he's not making this up. We know this. You don't need Yeshaya, you don't need Mishlei, you don't know any of that stuff. We just know that's true. This is the way it is. And the fact that the Torah is worded this way, gives us the opening to make this point. And to reinforce it, Rashi comes along and brings psuki. So you don't need anything else beyond that. Because the bottom line is that both the Torah written law and the oral law were given by Kodesh Baruch Hu to the Jewish people of Har Sinai.
So you're saying we know it strictly because of Masorah?
Yeah, 100%. That's the basis of all of our knowledge. And we don't know it's Masorah, we have question marks beside. So for example, in the Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi compiled the Mishnah, where there's no machlokis, it's written clearly as a halacha. Where there is a machlokis, he left it as a machlokis. He put the machlokis in the Mishnah so we would know this is unclear to us. The beauty of it is that basically beauty, but the practical application is how are you supposed to function? So he's saying there's two opinions. One opinion is more makpid, or more machmir even, right? More makpid is more accurate, right? So therefore, why not try and go like him? Because since there is somebody who says that, let's go by the one, because that would re-yotzi all opinions, right? But since there are extenuating circumstances where maybe we can't always go like him, it's good to know that somebody else who says more leniently instead. And that's what the Gedolim are passing by very often situations. It's because there is a mandamar in the Gemara, but without that mandamar, without someone in the Gemara, without the tradition, without that suffix, if there's no such opinion, we can't make it up on our own.
But when they're arguing in the Gemara, it's more than that Rabbi Yehuda says, no, this is the Masorah, and Rav Abaya
That's
says...
exactly what they are
always
doing. Always without exception. They just don't word it that way. The authority in any Mishnah or Gemara is how far you can trace that. When Rabbi Yehuda Nasi pulled together everybody to make the Mishnah, they sat there and they said, what did you hear? They said, I heard the halach like that. Where'd you get it from? I got it from him. Where'd he get it from? He got it from him. Where'd he get it from? Whoever could trace it back the furthest, that was the halacha. Okay. When a person's expressing an opinion, it will, and that's why, for example, the Gemara will often break down. I don't want to spend too much time on this discussion. Obviously, assurance to itself. But the Gemara, will say, you'll hear this Rab express, Elazar the Gemara will express his opinion over and over again. And he seems like, it's his opinion. And then you find out later on, he never said anything he never heard from his Rebbe. And Rashi also, right? Rashi will talk and talk and talk and say, that's Rashi talking, it's Rashi talking. And then once in a while, Rashi will say, I'm not sure, I didn't hear this from my Rebbe. And you realize now, all the time, he was quoting his Rebbe, what he learned from somebody else before. And when he didn't, he makes the point of speaking it out in the end. This is hugely important in understanding this whole process, because we're not making it up. What we're doing basically is we're using pardes to understand more deeply what we've always inherited, right? And what we lost, and we have to wait till Mashiach to bring it back. The Arizal, Baruch Hashem, we wouldn't have nearly the Kabbalah we have today if it wasn't for the fact that the Arizal came along later on, and of course Baruch Hu sent Eliyahu Navi, whoever, Moshe Rabbeinu, to teach him, and he was able to get the Ruach HaKodesh and recover things that had been lost to us or never even revealed in the first place. Because unlike Torah Shabbat Peh, the Nigla part, the revealed part, which gets weaker with every subsequent generation, Torah's Nistar seems to get stronger. And one of the reasons why, there's a historical reason why as well, which we'll get to later on in this version, but one of the reasons why is because Torah Shabbat Peh basically is straightforward halacha, requires a tradition. People forget. There's been persecution, assimilation, intermarriage. All these things interfere with the tradition. But Nistar requires understanding to survive, basically. And the physical world has become very, very Kabbalistic. How so? Look at technology today. If you took a person from 100 years ago and you put him today, you showed him a cell phone, right? Or anything, any like light bulbs, we have today, he'd think that you're a sorcerer. He'd think that you're a magician. How could you possibly do these? Everybody today is a sorcerer and a magician. They all have it so easily because he's coming from a time they didn't have it. So what happens is that technology became very magical because the more we understood the physical world, the more we're able to understand how it works and apply it. But the physical world is a mirror of the spiritual world. So by all this technological understanding has been helping us to come up with examples and parables to better understand the Kabbalistic world. It's much easier today. A long time ago, when the Rizal spoke about certain ideas, he had nothing to point and say, it's like that. Right? You either understood the idea, and you're blessed to understand it, or you didn't, because it was abstract. But today, you want to enter the spheres? I can use an analogy of a power plant and transformers, and use that as a way to explain one of the deepest, most Kabbalistic concepts there are. Because Akash Baruch Hu has allowed the physical world to become a better representation and revealer of the spiritual world. Let's just try and finish the introduction today. On the level of Drush, Bereshis is divided into two words. Bara, which means he created, and Shis, which is Aramaic for the word six. People ask, the Gemara brings down Megillah, examples of Aramaic words in the Torah itself. Obviously, it's not, the word doesn't stand alone. It's part of the word Bereshis. But, what does Shis mean? So it means six in Aramaic. As in the 6 days of creation. Hence, the Zohar is explaining...
Why does it have to be Aramaic?
That's what it is.
Sheish is 6.
Yeah, but it's written Shis. It's written. That's how you write Yud 6 in Aramaic. Is Shin Yud Taf. It doesn't say Shin Shin. Right? You have to change the whole word for that. So in order to build it in, you had to use the Aramaic word. So there's a few places the Gemara breaks down in Megillah where Kosh Baruch Hu used Aramaic words in the Torah. So obviously Aramaic has some kind of significance because Bavel, the Gemara is in Aramaic. Kaddish is in Aramaic. It has some role. It says that the Malach HaSheres don't understand Aramaic. A a problem. Some do, some don't. But that's the Medrash is saying. So it says, hence the Zohar is explaining, when God pronounced the word Bereshis, he brought into being all the 6 days of creation, as Rashi explains. All aspects of heaven and earth were created on the first day, but each was not put into place until the day on which it was actually commanded. So we see from Rashi and the Ramban as well, that everything, when the Baruch Hu said the word Bereshis, it's hard to comprehend, but in that one word, with the potential for all 6 days of creation that was going to exist. It was all created
on a physical level.
On a physical level, as physical as back then,
okay.
Right? But definitely as a Messiah, not a concept, not a conceptual level, right? In other words, for example, even though the sun, the moon, and the stars were not commanded into their places until the 4th day of creation, they came into existence on the 1st day of creation, like all other aspects of heaven and earth. And not just the first 6 days of creation, apparently, but even all 6,000 years destined to follow. This is what Bereshit teaches on the level of drush, making history far from random, because it's all built in. History is not simply evolving that, this next moment wasn't created until now, right? And therefore it just happened to be the result of what happened before it, but rather every single second of history from the beginning was already created. You, me, the whole world was all done at the beginning. And now, just like the same way the sun, the moon, the stars came on the fourth day, and the trees on the third day, and the water, that's what's happening historically. Whatever was created back then is now, is like a time capsule.
That gets very problematical.
Yeah.
Because now you're talking about the entire world was created from Tohu Vavohu until Yemos and Mashiach.
Take a look at the world around you. You have any doubt about that?
Huh?
So take a look at the world around you. Do you have any doubt about that?
I don't have a doubt. I listen. Conceptually, I can understand it, but think about it. How does free will fit into that? Okay, because essentially there are
Don't go there now. Don't go there now. Well, we can discuss on the side, but it fits in perfectly. There's no. I mean, what you're talking about now.
I can see how Hakadosh Baruch Hu, being Hakadosh Baruch Hu, would have created so many decision trees that if you decided to do this, it would go this way.
Yeah, just as a simpler, just to put it in perspective, you have to understand that all the events, and people that will ever exist were created at the beginning, but who's going to be the person personally who will do this particular act? That becomes a function of free will. It's a very important discussion for another time, but it'll sidetrack the whole thing. Okay, so he says
that's the concept. Everything, the Kodesh Baruch Hu,
at the beginning,
he created the whole ganze Geschichte from the very first.
That's what Bereshit means on a Jewish level. That's what Bereshit is telling you.
And essentially, what happens is that he lifted the veil on the moment that it was supposed to come into existence.
So lifted the veil. He put it in place. Whatever that means. But he organized.
Whatever metaphor you want to use. In other words, it's like being on stage. Like you got the next act. So the next act, the curtain goes up, right?
Right.
So the sun, moon, and stars appear.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
And then the sixth day, the man appears.
It was a 6-act play.
I got you.
Okay. Sod, which means secret, like drush, requires a tradition to give it credibility. Indeed, without tradition, the following about the word Bereshit could not be known. So again, Barashis, right? Over them, the spheres of Chesed, Gvur, Tiferes, Netzach, Hod, Yesod was a sphere of Bina, which created the 6 extremities of Chesed through Yesod. Going to be a grow. That's obviously we're going to run with Kabbalah at this point in time. But what does Barashis mean? Barashis means he made not just the 6 days on the first day when he said Bereshis, not just the 6 millennia that will come from it, right? But really the 6 spheres. This is the beginning of the 6 spheres. There are 10 spheres in all of existence. Keser, Chachma, Bina, Chesed, Gevur, Tiferes, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, Malchus. They govern all of existence from the beginning until even into Olam Haba. The 6 spheres of Chesed through Yesod are the cosmic DNA of our reality, basically. In order to make the 6 days of creation, you have to first make this cosmic DNA. So Kabbalah says that the Barashis is actually an indication that that's when the spheres of Chesed through Yesod actually came into existence. And because they came into existence, you can now have the 6 days of creation which depend upon them for their existence. That's what Barashis means.
So the 6th then, so that when he created the 6 days, right, that's really the spheres are analogous to the 6 days.
They are the root of them. The potential for the first day is in the sphere of Chesed. That's why it's the day of light. And Gevura is the basis for the second day. What happens on the second day? The water is divided. Dividing something is a function of Gevur. You're giving it borders and limitations, right? The third day is Tiferes. So you're getting the trees and all. The world starts to form. It looks more beautiful, more balanced. And so each day is based upon the koich of the sphera. That's the root of it. The same way, for example, you are the physical fulfillment of your DNA. Your DNA has all the information encoded. How tall you're going to be, what color your hair is going to be, the teeth, the whole. It's all encoded. So the rest of your life is basically just the acting out of what's already been encoded in your DNA. So likewise, each day was just like the sprouting of the potential that was in the sphera that corresponds to it. And that was made on the first day, when Kodesh Baruch Hu said, Barashis, the six spheres, right? A little diagram over here, the six spheres. So much of Kabbalah is concerned with understanding the concept of a sphere, of which there are in general 10. They depict different traits within existence, but they are completely spiritual on the basis of all that exists, spiritually and physically. They are the system that God created to receive His infinite light in order to constrict and filter it, eventually resulting in creation, man, and free will. In other words,
How does free will fit in here?
Moshe...
You put it there, Rob.
Yeah,
Okay? All right.
yeah.
How does that fit into the spirit?
I'll show you. Right? Moshe asked the Kodesh Baruch Hu, show me your face. And God says to Moshe Rabbeinu, no man can see my face and live. What does it mean? What does it mean to see a person's face? So Kabbalah explains, because the face basically is the most direct expression of a person. It shows the inside. So Moshe is saying to God, show me, I don't want to see the back of your head. I don't want to see your head. I want to see what you're thinking. I want to see what you're all about. I want to understand you on a much higher level. So God says to Moshe, on the level you're asking me about, your body couldn't handle that light. It's not possible, right? So we learn from this that God's light at its most intense levels, creation can exist. Now, when there's a miracle, free will disappears because it becomes so obvious that God's doing it. How can you choose not to believe in God? Like there was no denial. There was no maybe the planets are lining up. It was no, it was obvious. So then we can ask the question how it happened and come up with theories like that, because we're not experiencing Kriyas Yamsuf. It wasn't just simply a question of seeing it. It's also experiencing it. There's an atmosphere involved, and your whole body knows this is God doing it, right? So in order to have free will, you have to have Hester Pani. You have to have God able to do things in a way that can delude you into thinking there's a thing called nature in the head. You can't have Hester Panim if God's light is as intense as it is at the source. So how do you get Hester Panim? By having a system that filters the light down. So the spheres make possible physical creation. How do you get this table in a reality where God is totally spiritual? That's called Tzimtzum, right? The light is being filtered, it's being constricted. How do you get man, right? And different types of man. Different faces, no one looks the same because it's Tzimtzum, right? How do you get free will? Because it's Tzimtzum. It's all about filtering the light. So the spheres are the basis of the whole system that God created for the sake of man to exist in a world that has all the reality that you experience. At the same time, making possible free will so you can earn your reward in the world to come.
Does free will only exist in the sphere in which we're in?
No. Funny you should ask that question. I would have thought yes, but I saw something last Friday that says no. It starts higher up.
Really?
It starts higher up.
Well, not with the angels.
How does that happen?
Not with the angels, no.
How does that happen?
Because an neshama comes from a higher level.
Yeah.
And contrary to popular thought, what I once previously thought, that apparently the koyach of free will is not just because the body and soul come together, but it's actually rooted in the soul itself because of where it comes from. That's assured to itself. We can see the inside at another point in time, but it's not for now.
Before Marisha, because the Arizal said all the Jewish souls were inside.
It was before my Sabratius. Even before my Sabratius. Therefore, in order for creation to exist, the spheres had to first exist. And so it reveals that when God said Bereshit, He brought into existence the six spheres that are the basis of our 6 millennia, Chesed Yesod. The previous ones, Keser, Chachma, Bina, which are the basis of the eternal reality of Olam Haba, the world to come, had already been created. One word, 4 different layers of explanation, each one more profound than the previous, and each one with important implications about life and history. However, Pshat not only refers to a level of understanding, it also refers to a level of Torah learning. For example, the verse of the Torah, which is commonly called Torah Shebiksav, the written Torah can be read as they are written. They are the level of Pshat. The concise teachings of Torah Shebaal Peh, the oral law, or the Mishnah, correspond to the level of Remes, because they are only alluded to in the written Torah and hint to other levels of understanding. Drush, being the level of investigation, therefore corresponds to the Talmudic teachings, since they are the result of investigating the meaning of the Mishnayos and other aspects of the oral tradition. So, of course, corresponds to Kabbalah. So, when learning Mikra, another name for verse in the written Torah, it does not take much to make a person realize that an oral tradition must exist that more fully explains the meaning of the verse. This is especially so when it comes to actual laws, which most of the time cannot be understood by the information supplied by the written law. The Torah tells you the word tefillin, what a tefillin look like. The Torah tells you to shech an animal, how you do shechita. Right? Clearly, the Torah itself has to have something else to explain it. Anybody who negates the oral law but still learns Torah only replaces it. You can't negate the reality of the oral law because nobody can live by Torah without some kind of interpretation of what is actually being said. The only difference is going to be what's the source of that interpretation. Right? So he says, I keep saying he says, but the same is true when learning Mishnayos, which were constructed in a way as to prompt discussion and encourage further and deeper investigation. The Talmud, which does exactly this, is massive. Yet it itself is only a brief recording of the many discussions that have taken place over the ages to make sense of the oral teachings so that it can be applied in everyday life and become halacha. Therefore, many great minds and leaders over the ages have written explanations of the Talmud and responsa to legal issues of their times in order to speak out what is implied by the Talmud, but not necessarily recorded there. This especially became necessary as the exile of the Jewish people deepened, religious persecution intensified, and assimilation became rampant. People don't, a very important part of understanding the Masorah is also understanding the Jewish history. Another problem, because a lot of people don't take the time to do that. We think it's just basically passed on from generation to generation. But the reality is, there was once a time that the Jewish people were totally centralized. Came the Romans, and they began to disperse to different parts of Europe and Asia. And in the beginning, it's not like it was today. Today, you move into a Jewish community, everybody has a Rav. There's a Rav every 50 centimeters. You find another Rav, and a higher Rav, another Rav. But in the beginning, it was basically the other way around, that people were dispersed to different locales in different parts of the Roman Empire where there was no leadership whatsoever. You had people who wanted to still live by Torah and mitzvahs, but had no leadership. That forced people to write and send messengers and to travel far away to find a Rav, or the Rav would travel as well to come to them in order to instruct them and answer all the questions. It would come once a week, twice a week, once a month, once a year, and answer all the questions. And that forced the issue of having to write down response and collectively make bodies of knowledge that the Jews could draw on. The Rambam, when he wrote the Mishnah Torah, which he said will end the necessity for all other Sforim, basically was writing for the Jews of the diaspora. Because he said, people, they can't learn Gemara. They don't have a Gemara, first of all, if it's even available. But even if it's available, it's not necessarily accurate, and who can even learn it? So therefore, the Rambam, for 10 years, sat down, went through the entire Gemara, paskined all the shilas based upon whatever machlokas, whatever was clear. Whether it was a machlokas, he paskined, and this was meant to be the Shulchan Aruch of his time. Just like we have a Shulchan Aruch as well in our time, and Mishnah Brewer and all the responses to that. In the end, it spawned, he was so makatzer his words, it was so brief, that no sefer has spawned more svarim than the Mishnah Torah, in the index of the Torah itself. Right? And to this very day, people keep adding on and explaining more and more. But that's all part of the historic reality of the Masorah. So to preserve the integrity of Jewish law over the millennia, more and more of the oral law had to be written down, eventually developing into what has appropriately been called the Sea of Talmud. However, to what end? What in essence is Torah? Torah comes from a word that means teach. However, as the Talmud explains, it is not first and foremost a history book, and it will often sacrifice chronological accuracy to make a philosophical or legal point. But as Rashi explains, it is not only a legal book either. Right? Otherwise, it could have begun with the first mitzvah given to the Jewish people, and not an account of Ma'aseh Bereshis. Right? As Rashi points out at the beginning, the Torah should have begun with Zeh Chosh Lechem. The first mitzvah given to the Jewish people was Kish Chodesh. If it was meant to be only a Shulchan Aruch, only a book of law, it should have begun with the law. So he says, the Medrash provides an important clue for understanding what Torah should mean to us.
What are you trying to say here? What are you trying to say here?
We're trying to isolate what Torah actually is. We haven't done that yet. Mm-hmm. All we did so far was prove that it's not only a history book, and it's not only a legal book.
Right.
So then what is it? So the Medrash provides an important clue for understanding what Torah should mean to us. When God decided to make creation, He looked into the Torah as if it were a blueprint. If so, then why give the Torah to us? Why give the blueprint for creation to man? Something which apparently, as the Talmud teaches, the angels argued against. It says in the Gemara in Shabbos. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi has also said, when Moshe ascended on high, the ministering angels said before the holy and blessed is he, Master of the universe, what business has one born of woman amongst us? He's come to receive the Torah. He answered he to them. They said to him, that secret treasure which has been hidden by you for 974 generations before the world was created, you want to give to flesh and blood? What is man that you are mindful of him, and the Son of Man that you visit him? O Lord, our God, how mighty is your name in all the earth. Who has set your glory, the Torah, upon the heavens? So from that, the angels argued. Right? Moshe came back with an answer in the end, right? But the reality is that on a sod level, Moshe's answer also creates more questions. The question is still why the Torah is given to us. It was simply the blueprint of creation. However, the point was only to create good soldiers, that is, of doing the mitzvahs to the best of our ability, and thereby earning reward in the world to come. A streamlined version of the Torah would have sufficed. If it was only a question of getting pshat, of only understanding the intricacies of everyday halacha, so that we can become b'nei olam haba, people destined to go to the world to come, then the Rambam's Mishnah Torah or something like it would have been enough. And if it is enough, then why do we continue to suffer as a nation in spite of our best efforts to increase our fulfillment of the mitzvahs and expand our learning of the Talmud? In fact, why is it that, in spite of our level of genius and vast knowledge of Torah, we seem to underestimate the seriousness of historical events and often fall prey to our enemies at the end of each exile? Could it be that we are drowning in Pshat?